Good morning, Lisa. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Good morning, Cindy.
Oh, you sound great this morning. Oh, and I see that Vina has just unmuted her line, so she's going to be joining us.
Good morning, everyone. All right. I want to thank you for joining us today. The Our Driving Concern Employer Traffic Safety Program is pleased to be able to offer the webinar, A Vehicle is a Workplace. I want to welcome our presenters this morning, Lisa Robinson and Cindy Leonard. Lisa is the Senior Program Manager with Our Driving Concern, and Cindy is our Program Manager with Our Driving Concern. A few things to note before we get started. If you joined us via phone, please press *6 to ensure your phone is muted. This will minimize background noise and ensure sound quality. This is a listen-only webinar, and you do have the ability to type questions during the webinar using the chat function anytime during the webinar. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. If you should encounter any problems or issues, please type a message in the chat function to let us know, or you can email me at vina@anderson@nsc.org. The presenter's contact information will be available on the last slide. There is a very brief post-event survey at the conclusion of the webinar. Because this program is funded through grant dollars and provided at no cost to employers, we would greatly appreciate your feedback. With that, I welcome Lisa and Cindy, and we'll turn it over to them to begin.
Thank you, Vina. I appreciate it. Cindy, would you welcome? Thank you for joining me this morning. Would you kick it off by telling a little bit about the webinars before we get started?
Sure. I'd be glad to, Lisa. Thanks for that introduction, Vina. You're doing great assisting us this morning with all the coordinating and getting WebEx going. We're so excited each of you has joined us today to talk about the vehicle as a workplace. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't overlook the other upcoming webinars that we have scheduled right now. We have one tomorrow that's kind of a follow-up of today where we talk more about safety culture. So today you're going to hear us talk a lot about the vehicle as a workplace, and we're going to intentionally leave off the discussion that's safety culture related because we're going to pick that up tomorrow. So be sure that you tune in for that tomorrow as well. And then we have some other things listed here, but know that Lisa, Vina, and I are looking at some other webinar opportunities to share with you in the next coming months. We know that this is a valuable time for you as many of you work remotely, some of you for the first time working remotely, and so we hope that you'll take advantage of the fact that our webinars are free and available and convenient and can help you with your transportation safety issues. So, Lisa, I think we're ready to go. I think everybody sounds good.
Absolutely.
We're hearing a lot of people join us today, and we're glad to have them.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I'm so glad you're joining me and Cindy, and you're, during this time when we're all thinking about safety. I have done this presentation talking about the vehicle as or is a workplace many times, and it's always a great conversation. And so I'm excited today that we get to bring you, our webinar minutes. We're really trying really hard to bring many webinars that are really great sound bites for you because it gives you a great opportunity to quickly get some content in a 10 to 20-minute range, be able to take it back, apply the information, use it, share it. And so with that, let's get started. I want to talk a little bit about what we plan for. I always make jokes, and this is probably one of my favorite things when we say, what do we plan for in life? Well, we plan for a new baby. And I always make jokes about, when you have that first child, it's funny how you have to buy the minivan to hold all the gear that you have to take, and then it takes 9 months for a baby because you know darn well that you can't go home with that baby right away unless you are prepared. You have read every book there is known to man, when that baby comes so that you are completely 100% prepared or no one's going to give you that baby, right? We safety-proof everything, surfaces. And I remember being a way overprotective mother with my first child and going way overboard in so many things. And so when we think safety, when it comes to having a baby, that is pretty much our top priority because we know it's our responsibility, right, as a parent. And we're going to explore every bit of information. Same way with retirement. If I'm not doing a good job planning and I'm not prepared, I'm going to be in the poorhouse, right? Just like Monopoly. And so that's another thing that we really spend a lot of time thinking about and planning for and preparing for. we invest in that. That's a key thing that we do, right? And I don't know if you're like me, but probably the worst part of taking a cruise is this mandatory safety. And they're going to make sure everybody's out of their cabins to go for this mandatory safety briefing, right? If you've been on a cruise, this is expected. And, you know, again, it goes back to safety. What's required? What do we have to do to be prepared? And so when we think about making sure that we've done a lot of things to prepare for where we're, you know, what we need to do to be successful, I don't know if you're like me, but I'm finding grocery shopping online with pickup totally does not allow me to do some of my impulse shopping. In fact, it was funny the other day I had to run in, and I looked down at my cart, and there was donuts, there was cookies, there was everything that was stress eating, but no real food in that cart, you know? And so when you think about it, you got to plan accordingly, because I know I need to be eating that broccoli. I know that that broccoli is way better for me, and I know that should be a part of my diet. But honestly, if I don't have that list, and actually Cindy made a comment earlier this morning about how she's got to go in with her list. She's got to be planned and prepared to go in quickly, decisively, and she's got to think about what are her alternatives. So, and I love that, how that really plays into safety and alternatives. Cindy, I'm going to ask you, what are your thoughts about planning and preparing?
Well, Lisa, I think you know the answer to that. We've known each other for now more than 20 years, and you know I like to plan. You know I don't like to have anything occur that hasn't already been anticipated and planned for. And if I have to adjust, it makes me a little uneasy. I can do it, but I'm not really that flexible in that regard. So, you know, planning comes into all aspects of our life, be it grocery shopping or getting ready for a big life event. Our household decided a couple of months ago that now would be a good time to get a puppy. And we did this before the COVID-19 changeover. We made that decision. So now, in the midst of all of the transition and kind of the stress of the newness of being at home and being at home full time, we also have a new puppy that we are dealing with. And he doesn't come with a plan. He really kind of throws all the plans out the door. So, you know, I think COVID-19 is something that we'll talk about in relation to transportation and to the transportation landscape as it is right now, won't we, Lisa?
Absolutely. And if you think about it, what's going on right now is kind of like grocery shopping. You know that you've got to have safety. You know you need the broccoli, but you end up with the chocolate, you know, the chocolate chip cookies and some of the junk. So how do you go forward, right? How do you make safety and you think about that vehicle? And, you know, Jenny, and everybody here today, we know that an employer's bottom line, and we're seeing it day in and day out, where every employer is making tough decisions because the bottom line is affected for every decision that is being made, even more so now with our economy the way that it is. But when it comes to safety, I can tell you every time I speak at an event and I talk about, you know, the decisions that are made, it's always the bottom line, it's always cost, it's always money when we talk about safety. And they always say that every decision that's made, you know, that is something that an organization will have to bring into that conversation is the cost, right? What's it going to cost us to be safe? What's it going to cost us to implement this? What are we going to do? And so the reality is the bottom line is a part of every conversation. And so you have to figure out how that really plays into the vehicles and transportation and what exactly does that look like and what does that mean? And that brings me to my next point, because this is probably one of the things that I try to hit home in a lot of my presentations and I like to talk about is, you know, we train, we hire, we equip people for a job, right? We are really good. When you look at a lot of job ads, and I can tell you, I will look at a lot of job ads, and I spend a lot of time kind of researching and looking, and I will see job ads, and it tells exactly what that job function is, what somebody's being hired for. But the part that they kind of leave off that's ancillary, that's really small, is the driving aspect, okay? It's the component that's required to actually fulfill the job duties. They may need to drive to the location to do that job. They may need to drive back from that job. There are different components of the job that require driving. And so a lot of times when I'm looking at, you know, the classified ads, or I'll look and I see at the very bottom, must have a valid driver's license. And so that tells me that the driving aspect to complete the job is really a small focus. It's really not even really on the radar. They're just making sure when somebody's got a driver's license, because they assume if someone has a driver's license that they can drive well. And I always say, just because someone has a driver's license does not mean they drive well. They may have 20 years of bad driving habits and bad driving experience. And so it doesn't mean that they understand how to drive well and safely. And so I think in our job classifieds, we have to think about when we talk about hiring and training for a job, we've got to think about what opportunities does actual driving come into play. And when I say driving, I'm thinking about the personal vehicle, the company vehicle, even doing a quick errand for the company, right? It's not simply just, the level and the degree of driving. It's the fact, are they going to touch a vehicle during those work hours, and what does that look like? And so, Cindy, any thoughts about that, specifically when it comes to talking about, hiring and training, employees and the job as far as the classifications when we advertise jobs?
Sure. Well, a couple of things come to mind here, Lisa. I think a lot of, like you said, the advertisement for the job opportunity typically does not involve the driving capacity. It typically doesn't address that driving, and yet we know that employees are driving as a part of their job and to and from work constantly. And so in the realm of cost to the employers, that driving habit is very important, and driving safely is very important for the employer. One of the things that I've noticed recently, Lisa, and I don't think we've talked about this, but there's a job employment platform on the internet that I've noticed recently. If you click on a certain job to see if you have those qualifications, at the bottom it allows for you to put in your home address and chalk out your commute to that location. So we know that commuting is a significant part of why people choose a job sometimes, and if that is now part of what you're looking at when you look at a job opportunity, then considering those employees and how they drive is an aspect that you should be considering as well.
Absolutely. And, and we hire people, and I made this comment earlier, we hire people to do specific jobs. It could be sales. It can be a variety of things that we are actually hiring somebody for that we need them to be able to do specifically, right? And so we train them as we possibly can on how to be that salesperson. But we sometimes overlook the fact that they're going to drive to meetings. They're going to drive to someone's location. They may be in all of these different components. They may be driving their personal vehicle to the airport. We overlook all these other aspects because we make the assumption because they have a driver's license, they're a good driver. And so we kind of forget that piece of the puzzle, and I think that's part of the puzzle that should not be overlooked, and it should be looked at a little bit closer and be included.
Absolutely.
So, and just like you made the comment about the driving, we know that the roadway is the most dangerous part of their work environment. So we know that. And even right now, when people are saying less people are on the roadway, we're also seeing an uptick in speeding. So there's still risk, right? And so we forget sometimes because we know what they're doing is so important. Like I might be somebody who's running errands, and I may be going to pick up the lunch for a meeting. But we know that there's risk involved with that. And I shouldn't be overlooked when it comes to educating me on the safest way to do all of my job aspects. We know that transportation safety, we've talked about this if you've attended any of our webinars, that occupationally transportation is the leading cause of fatalities. And so you cannot overlook the fact that this is a major component when we talk about the bottom line and the cost to the employer. And so you can't just say, because I'm driving a vehicle for this company, yeah, I fit into this arena. We've got to think seriously about why the vehicle is a part of the workplace and not that secondary component, right? It's very costly to a company, and it hits the bottom line. And Cindy, I know that I want you to come in and talk a little bit about that as well, because I know during our driving concern, you do spend a lot of time talking about the fact that the vehicle is important and, the crashes. And do you have a couple other thoughts you want to share at this time about some of the other components?
Absolutely, Lisa. We think about the employee in several different aspects, and we're talking today about their driving capacity. But one of the things that we talk about in transportation training are the types of behaviors that an employee or anybody who's driving might engage in that puts them at risk. And one of the topics that we discuss heavily is impairment. Right now especially, but in other times as well, impairment is more and more of an issue that employers are facing as employees may be working from home. They may be experiencing more stress. They have better access now to the alcohol in their dining room or in their cabinet than they would if they were in the workplace. All these changes that have occurred recently make the employee more vulnerable to access and to impairment issues, and as a result, impact the employer. And, you know, one of the things that I didn't see an icon for on the last slide was the lost time that might be involved when an employee is either too tired to perform their functioning as an employee at an optimal rate. You know, fatigue, impairment, distraction all play a role in a person's capacity to perform, right? And whether or not those tasks are time sensitive, we know that if something is slowing you down, is keeping you from your task, is causing you to delay, is preoccupying your mind or your capacity, then that's a cost to the employer as well. That lost time is something that we don't always measure in dollars and cents, but it's definitely there. You know, Lisa, we share a story in the impairment training about an employee who is using an inhalant on the job in the work closet. And her supervisor estimates that she is lacking job task commitment at about a 35% rate. Well, over a year's time, that means that 35% of her salary is out the window in terms of the employer getting that result from that employee. So, you know, job task commitment and time lost as a result of some of these issues are of concern to the employer. But now more than ever, the employer can really dial in and needs to dial in to the needs of that employee. You know, Lisa, we talked a lot last week, and we talked to Brian about this as well. Employers can really help their employee in significant ways by being a comfortable place, a safe place for them to talk about their fears and their frustrations and their stress right now.
Well, and two, you know, with what's going on, we also need to make sure that we haven't forgotten some of the vehicle maintenance or the environmental factors. I mean, it's really important because some of the environmental factors right now are the fact that there's less people on the roads and there's more speeding, right? That's some of the road conditions that we're seeing when we think about what's going on around us, but also vehicle maintenance. And so if some of the fleet is going to be idle and not be used for a couple of months, you've got to wonder about, you know, what's the maintenance on that vehicle whenever all of the fleet's actually back in play. So you really have to make sure that when you think about the job and what's going on, that the roadway is an extension of the workplace. You know, we think about the workplace a lot of times as a building. We think of the workplace as being, this is the building that we go to. This is where, you know, HR, this is where all the people go, and this is where our meetings happen. And sometimes the workplace is in the field somewhere. Sometimes that workplace is out in a building. Sometimes it's in a field somewhere. But the roadway is that extension. That's what bridges what we do. And you cannot overlook the fact that the roadway is a very important component. It's probably one of the most important safety components that you have to think about. And, you know, Cindy made a comment about, you know, fatigue, and she made a comment about impairment. And all of that affects the person's ability to do their job. And so it's really important. And when you think about that, you know, there's a lot of vehicles that are out there. You know, there's a lot of personal vehicles, rental cars. I made a comment earlier, picking up supplies, sales. We see a lot of vehicles, and, you know, they've got trailers with them. There's all of these things, right? But again, they're doing the tasks that they were hired to do. Did we talk about the transportation aspect even when it comes to pulling a trailer, driving with other vehicles, different safety behaviors and driver behaviors that are so key and so important? Again, your bottom line is affected by the behaviors of that employee. And I always say this because it's such an important component. Everybody believes that there's safety features in place, right? The driver is the most important safety feature of that vehicle. And that driver is the most important asset you have in being able to complete that job function. And so if we overlook the driving aspect, we've overlooked a key component. And so we can't think of it as a one and done. We have to think about this dialogue as being consistent and ongoing. We also have to think again about the workplace. We have to think about the environment, and we have to think about the vehicle. And you've got to think about, I made a comment earlier about vehicle maintenance. That's going to be definitely a concern if vehicles have not been maintained or they've not been on the roadway during this time of shutdown. And we've got to think about the driver, right? What's gone on with this person sitting at home for 2 months? Or a month? Have we continued to make sure that we have educated them and we've stayed in contact? Have we continued to make sure that we're grabbing every 2 minutes to make sure that driver safety is a continuous and an ongoing conversation? Just because people might be at home and being remote and people might not be in the office, it doesn't mean that safety stops, because safety doesn't sleep. Okay? Safety doesn't stop just because people aren't doing the normal. And now's a really great opportunity, if you can, to make transportation safety a little bit more heightened in your outreach and things like that. So you've got to be prepared. Cindy, I know that you made a comment briefly about fatigue and impairment. Are there any other points you want to make at this point regarding that?
Well, distraction right now is at an optimal point. We always talk about distraction and we talk about that cell phone, right? And it becomes our target of focus. When we think of distraction, we think of that cell phone. But we saw an interesting slide last week of distraction, the cell phone, and that COVID virus molecule. And the COVID-19 virus is equally distracting, not just for some, but for all of us these days. And so it's important to keep that in mind with respect to your employees. You know, what are you asking of them, and are you giving them enough time to decompress? Are they having some autonomy in the tasks that they can do reliably during this time? We particularly have concern about fatigue in our truck drivers or fatigue in our fleet drivers who don't have jobs that can take them off the road and working in a remote capacity. So what are you doing to dial in and take their pulse on a daily basis, as well as just giving them that opportunity to communicate with you any concerns that they have? So distraction has taken on a little bit of a turn, if you will, away from the types of distractions that we're normally used to into something that's more complex right now.
That's a good point. Very good point. And, you know, one thing I do want to bring into play, because I mentioned this about even that employee who may be running an errand, or the person who's going to do a bank deposit, or the person that, you know, is driving the vehicle to the airport or driving that rental car. We know that about 62% of the employees who died occupationally were not primary motor vehicle occupation. That was not their primary function. They were not motor vehicle operators by their primary occupation. And so knowing that tells me that it's important, and employers are looking at every single employee when it comes to our safety and our education. We cannot overlook, you know, safety should be 100% of our employee population. We shouldn't, you know, target, and we shouldn't segment. And that brings me to another point, that when you look at industry and you look at what's gone on, transportation has been a leading cause of fatalities for many years. This hasn't changed. And when we look at industry and we look at what's happened and we look at the different things over the categories, it's not changed over the years. Transportation is still that leading cause. And so, we know that we need to pay attention to data to do what we do when it comes to safety and education. And so that tells you that safety is staying prevalent. And we know that all the different, industries are affected, but you can't overlook any industry when it comes to transportation. And so it's an important component of every industry, not one industry. Cindy, how about talking a little bit about age and gender for us a minute?
Well, Lisa, age and gender don't have a lot to do with our capacity to stay focused and stay clear while driving. We do know that occupationally, younger drivers are being given the reins, so to speak, of trucking industry more than before. Because of the demand for the job, we're seeing more younger drivers become truck drivers, and as a result, there's a little more of a focus on the experience of that driver and their capacity to drive something and haul something as large as a truck. So a lot of responsibilities coming their way, and these are things that we know the trucking industry is keeping in mind, is very focused on, is they're watching this very closely. But for all of us, it's really important to see that males and females drive about the same way. They have about the same risk, and we don't see greater risks crossing over age groups to the degree that we may imagine that we do.
You're right. So, it's important, I think, Cindy, what you just shared is all age groups and all genders. You can't dissect and you can't say it's only for this and it's only for that. I think that's an important component. We hear a lot of people say, well, we're investing in this younger driver versus our seasoned driver, and we see that those seasoned drivers have numbers as well. So I think those are really great points, Cindy, that you shared. One thing I want to mention is you might be compliant, but are you safe? You know, I heard that the other day from Brian Feklow, and when he was talking, and one of the things that really hit me is safety over compliance. It's really important. You know, being compliant is what drives everybody. Everybody is driven by being compliant. But are you safe, right? Are you safe enough? So I really want this slide to remind you that safety should be guiding you and safety should be leading you. Safety should be your primary focus. Safety should be guiding and directing you. I know the bottom line is guiding and directing a lot of people, but we have to think about the safety, and it needs to be primary. What are we asking our employees to do, and what are our employees doing behind the wheel? Maybe we're not asking them to do anything, but do we know what they're doing behind the wheel? Are we aware? Cindy made a really great point earlier when she talked about we know that distraction is heightened right now because of COVID. We know that people are automatically already distracted by that. What else may be distracting them when they're behind the wheel? Do we have some employees going to work, some working remotely, right? What if they are going back and forth to the office and driving isn't a primary function, but you know what? They are concerned because they're still on the roadway every day. So we know that the distraction is heightened. So again, having these conversations and making the transportation piece a little higher on the priority is really important. And, you know, safety should be leading.
If I could just make another comment on that slide before you move it forward.
This one?
We know we had a survey a couple of years ago that indicated that employees feel very compelled to answer the phone when their employer is calling. We found 44% of employees will answer that call if it's their supervisor. So, you know, it may be as simple as just having a direct conversation, letting your employees know that you don't want them to answer the phone when you're calling if they're driving. It's it's a lot easier often to pull over fairly quickly than we think it will be to take that call. And for a supervisor to communicate that care and that compassion and that concern for the employee is really very key during any time. But, you know, if you haven't done that already, if you've assumed that your employees understand that you don't want them to take your call while driving, why not take a couple of minutes and communicate that to them? It really could be the difference between them taking a risk and not.
Good point. I want to talk about safety should be leading forward-facing. You know, we had a company before that called me and they said, you know, we're tired of chasing our crashes. We're tired of chasing our crash rates. We are tired of this. This is not where we want to be. And so when they really started putting safety measures as their priority, they now had a handle on it and they weren't constantly chasing. So you should think about where you want to be and how you're going to get there instead of constantly looking at the data and going, you know, and you're constantly working on the crash reports, or you're constantly looking at the incident report, and you're constantly addressing the driver after the incident occurred. How do we get ahead of it? How do we get to where we want to be? And that's leading where we want to be with our numbers. And so I think that's a total different shift, because a lot of times people are constantly looking at what's the data telling us and what's occurring right now, but how do we get to where we want to be? So thinking a little bit differently about how we address safety so that transportation's a higher component and not after the fact when we only have incidents. How do we change that shift, right? How do we determine that we can do it differently? And you know what? As we wrap up, we've got a couple more points to make, but there are no do-overs when it comes to safety, right? We don't get a second chance. Cindy, can you think of something that you've ever done that, you know what, you got a do-over to do, like a hair color maybe, right?
Yeah, or if you've ever, right, it can be the wrong hair color, or while we're talking about hair, it can be a bad cut, and it'll all grow out. It'll all get better. Right. It'll all improve, and you'll be able to wipe the slate clean. But unfortunately, when it comes to risk and when it comes to crashes, there are no do-overs. Exactly what you said, Lisa. There would have, should have, could have. Great hindsight, right? But, you know, going forward, you really want to be compelled to think about how things can be avoided in the first place. Having those conversations, having those safety talks, having posters, having send-outs, having platforms with your social media where you share our driving concern Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. All of those are front end ways to get in front of your
Forward-facing.
employees, and we're glad to help you do that in any capacity that we can.
Absolutely. And you know what? Safety. When you invest in safety, you're looking at where you want to be instead of going behind it and constantly chasing it. And safety does pay off. We know many companies, and we share all of this data in our awards program because every year we get great information and great data from employers, and so I encourage you to look at that data because that's what every employer is, again, the bottom line is driving every decision that you're making. But if you're not thinking about transportation safety as an extension of the workplace and you're not looking at 100% of your employee population, you're missing out on ways to save, and you're missing out on ways to be safe. So Cindy, I want to close here today because we're at our time, but I do want to say we're here for you. We love being able to do these webinars. We go to lots of meetings virtually as well as in person. Right now we're not traveling, but that's something that we do a lot of is we like to share transportation safety. We're offering even more webinars during this time where we know most people are not able to travel, and so this is one way we can keep bringing safety to you, to your meetings, to your workplace. We can help you with some of the things that we're doing really well. And Cindy, as we wrap up, any other points about some of the upcoming trainings or education opportunities?
I do. I have a couple of points, but Lisa, I want to just reverberate one of the things I'm seeing in the chat box, and that is that now during this time of cuts and furloughs and layoffs and things like that, and emergency funds because of the COVID-19 crisis, we're going to see cuts in safety. Unfortunately, that's going to be one of those areas that employers seek the opportunity in which to cut. We implore you to not do that if you have it within
Correct.
your capacity in your job, to continue going forward with funding safety. But in that regard, everything we bring you is grant funded and is free as a result. So dial into us. Let us know how we can help you. If there's a topic that you are more concerned about, or something that you haven't seen us covered in our resources on our website, then let us know that too, because we have the capacity to figure out how to bring that to you, to do a little bit of the background, the ongoing resources that we have that are continually being updated and refreshed. We can certainly bring that to you in several capacities. And Lisa's mentioned our webinars, and that is definitely one of the things that we know you're dialing into. But on our website, we also have recorded webinars that you can access through YouTube. So take advantage of those as well. I'll be sending you a follow-up email in the next couple of days that will have some other key pieces of information on it that relate to the topic today. And we just encourage you to continue giving us your feedback, continue letting us know how we can help you, and understand that we're here to support all of your safety in transportation.
Thank you guys for your comments today. We appreciate your positiveness. It's a tough time right now. We want to be your safety ambassadors. We want to be your partners. So thank you guys for joining us today. We hope you join us tomorrow in some of our future webinars. And again, you have our contact information. You are more than welcome to call, email me with any ideas or suggestions. And if we can make it happen, we're going to be glad to do that. So you guys have a safe day. Wash your hands and be safe. Thank you so much. And be sure to do the evaluation. Those are important for us. Thank you, guys.
Does Vina have any closing remarks, Lisa?
Vina, anything else you want to add?
I think you pretty much covered it.
All right.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you all.
Yep, you mentioned the brief survey at the end as they exit out, and stay safe. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone.